This is Pottery Selection 101. We're going to talk about finding the right pot for your tree. This is, first of all, we're going to talk about conifers. Conifers are, because they're evergreens, basically go into the category of non-glazed pottery. All conifers, general rules, non-glazed pottery. And you know, there are exceptions, but that's our general rule we work with. So this is a Hinoki cypress, chokan style. We have an unglazed, kind of a reddish brown pot. And really, you want to select a type of pot too that gives it a characteristic of age. Because that's our whole attempt in bonsai, is to create a tree that looks ancient. So your tree and pot should coincide, and your pot should look pretty old also. This is a unglazed pot. It has little faces on the lines, faces on the feet, but it's pretty simple pot. The depth of the pot right here normally, ideally, should be smaller than the width of the trunk. I don't know if you can see that, but the width of the trunk should be greater than the depth of the pot, and that makes it so that the trunk stands out, and you're not looking at all pot and no tree. Okay, the length of the pot, what used to be almost like 3/4 the height of the tree, but you could kind of maybe reduce that thinking, and your pot length should be about maybe the spread of the branches coming out sideways, or it could be just in a little bit, not quite as wide as the width of the branches spread this way. So that gives it good proportion. And let's see. So these characteristics, unglazed pots for conifers, depth of the pot should be smaller than the width of the base of the tree, and the length of the pot should be within or about the spread of the branches on either side. And let's see, and the placement of the tree in the pot, you want to have your number one branch going over the greater space of the pot. So therefore we move this trunk over this way, not centered. If we go this way too much, then this branch is going to fall and come out of the pot too much. So that's why we have it slightly over to the right, because the biggest branch is off to the left. Okay. So the next tree we want to talk about or discuss are our deciduous trees. Deciduous trees can, as a general rule, be in glazed pots and possibly non-glazed pots. They have more of an option. This Korean hornbeam is in a glazed cream-colored tokoname pot, and the width of the base is much greater than the depth of the pot, so it really makes the trunk look spectacular. The massiveness of the trunk looks spectacular. It's a little bit shorter than the spread, which is okay. We just don't want this length to be longer than the spread of the tree. And because this is sort of a double trunk tree, the smaller tree apex is on this side. It's hard to see on that photo, but on this side, and then the lowest branch is on this side also. So that's why we move the trunk a little bit off center on this side of the pot. So there's a little bit more space on this side. Sometimes when you have a real massive trunk, it's sort of okay to have the tree in the center, like this maple over here, this trident maple. This is a really massive trunk. Sometimes it's hard to move it over to one side or the other, and it just have a little more balance on this particular tree to be in the center, and that's really fairly acceptable. So that's okay. Now, this is a deciduous tree, not in a glazed pot. It's in an unglazed gray pot. Actually, it's a handmade Korean pot. But a lot of times, and I'll just touch on this briefly, is that sometimes we select a pot that accentuates the trunk in some way. And this gray has some gray coloration in the trunk, so it sort of picks that up and complements the trunk. That's one of my things I like to do is look at the pot in relation to the trunk. This is another trident maple with an unglazed light brown pot, and I don't know, it's hard to see, but if you look up close, there's the same kind of brown color in the pot as on the trunk itself, and so it kind of pulls it together. It's not like you have a tree that's all corky and then you put it in a smooth pot and it is like it just fights with each other. It doesn't connect to each other. So if you could connect the pot with some sort of characteristic of the tree, that's great. Like sometimes deciduous trees, you may pick a pot with fall color, thinking about the fall color. So you might have a soft blue glazed pot when you display it. The only other thing I'd like to mention is that when you show a tree in the show someday, you want to show it at its peak time of year. And what I mean is that a wisteria tree, you don't want to show it in the summer, you want to show it when it's blooming. A lot of deciduous trees can be shown when they're dormant, as in like a winter silhouette, or maybe in the fall, if there's a fall show, when it has fall color. So you want to, or when it's fruiting, you want to show it when it has that fruit on. So that's the ideal time to show those kind of trees, when it has the most interesting part of its season displayed, and that's when you want to display it. Okay?